Hello there, welcome to Eric's Anime and Gaming Commentary channel. Today I'm going to break a bit more into anime commentary and move a little bit away from gaming material for some time. Today's focus will be on the manga and anime series One Piece, and particularly the character Blackbeard. Now, before we get into it, I do want to remind you to consider that if you do enjoy the content in this video that follows after this, please consider subscribing to my channel and sharing the video. It does help to get more visibility. As well, that you might consider throwing a donation my way if you do have the means. It's never expected and not necessarily demanded, but it does help a lot to encourage the growth of my channel. It takes a lot of time and resources to focus on producing videos of this quality and covering this much material, and it takes off a lot of the pressure when I know that I don't have to risk too much of my own finances and time to do it. With that said, let's proceed into this topic. Now, there are many heroic type characters in One Piece. There are many villainous type characters in One Piece. But I've always found Blackbeard to be of particular interest. So this will be a general commentary on his character. So now, getting into it, of course, as many do know or have some familiarity with, Marshall D. Teach Blackbeard, the character design of this particular one was inspired actually by a real-life pirate. We do have, historically speaking, a real-life pirate going by the alias of Blackbeard. I believe the real name of Blackbeard was Edward Teach, whereas in One Piece we have Marshall D. Teach. And it's almost like Ichiro Oda took the name of the real Blackbeard and split it into two pirates, one piece going to Edward Newgate in some sense, and one going to Blackbeard in another sense. And that's an interesting concept, maybe somewhat reflective of a spiritual principle of what might have been represented in Dragon Ball Z, with Kami splitting himself into two in this attempt to separate from his inner evil, so to speak. Because you find that the real-life Blackbeard, and I'm not promoting any of the real-life pirates as great people or innocent by any means, but one thing we do know, he was a Black Flag pirate, which is actually a lot better than it sounds. So apparently pirates in these days, they had two types of flags, the red flag and the black flag. And red flag was very, very bad. It meant this was a no-quarter person. Like, to put this into perspective, some of the, if you had like a sort of an Islamic radical kind of group at the time, is going to just behead everyone, they'd probably fly a red flag. What this means is no quarter given, no mercy shown. We're going to kill every last one of you. With Blackbeard and his black flag, it gave you the knowledge that you might actually survive an encounter with this guy. If you survive the initial battle, they're just going to take your stuff. The other very interesting thing about the historical Blackbeard is he was a very strategic type of character. Now, let's get into One Piece, knowing that background and asking the question whether it fits well with our Marshall D. Teach Blackbeard of One Piece, or whether it gives us some hints perhaps, or maybe it doesn't fit perfectly and the original was just sort of a general model to sort of start and work with for Oda to develop very unique ideas with. And of course, I think we can definitely see some questions there. Blackbeard in One Piece is not slow to killing, so to speak. But in his defense, he's not somebody who rushes to it either. We find many times he's very strategically sound and very tactically minded in his movements. So he goes on these devil fruit hunts with his new gained power from his Yami Yami no Mi to steal the fruit powers from other characters. And unfortunately, this process kills the person who has their respective devil fruit extracted out of them. Now, this makes Blackbeard look rather villainous. But despite this, we could say Blackbeard still isn't necessarily a killer per se on the basis of this, because his goal was not really to kill those people. His goal was to get what they had, the devil fruits. Blackbeard is looking to accomplish some measure of success as a person, as a pirate, in a world where success is reckoned as the acquisition of these otherworldly powers and abilities through devil fruits, through haki, and the various forms thereof. This is the space Blackbeard occupies. Everything he does revolves around strengthening himself in these matters, so he engages in these various operations such as the hunts with that in mind. So we'd be left with the question, is Blackbeard the worst of villains? Is he likable? Is he dislikable? How do you reckon that? And it's very interesting. Something I've noticed that I find for Blackbeard kind of gives me a strange fondness for him is that he actually comes off as rather respectful, believe it or not, of his major rivals. He's had numerous encounters with Luffy at this point, Luffy being the main character. He's had other encounters with formidable characters. He's also had encounters in recent chapters. Spoiler alert, of course. If you're not up to date with the recent manga, you might want to be wary of that. But with Trafalgar Law. And in all of these encounters, you notice trends. The people that Blackbeard is the most moody and disrespectful towards tend to be these, what he's called those old legends, or what others have called the old legends, the people who have just sat around for a very long time, occupying a lot of space and shutting down rookies for a very long time and blockading the progress of others. These are the people that Blackbeard tends to really vex and agitate in his speech and dialogue. You notice a bit of that in his talk with Garp and Sengoku, his belittling them, using that kind of tactic. Can you protect Marineford? How he talked to Whitebeard. But you do notice in scenes and exchanges where he's dealing with somebody who's more part of his so-called generation, he is a little bit more respectful. He has more of a smile on his face most of the time. And of course, obviously Blackbeard is very confident because he's invested a lot into his intellect, into being kind of a schemer. He's worked out very intricate plots to get to places and executed them successfully. Sometimes the smile is just sort of his general confidence. And exactly as Whitebeard mentioned in his momentary battle with Blackbeard, he has an overconfidence to him that he struggles with as a character flaw. However, despite even all these considered, you notice with Blackbeard, he has this kind of sense where there's times where that smile's on his face, there's times where he has these encounters with his fellow members of the worst generation, especially ones that are more formidable, where he seems to be finding pleasure in it outside all those things and all those considerations. It seems to be that there's some part of his consciousness, some part of his character that actually wants to be challenged by someone. He actually wants, I'd say based on my reading of it, Blackbeard likes to have someone who's going to offer a reasonable threat to him. Despite that, you might think he's looking to dominate. I don't think Blackbeard's the type of character that wants to live in a world without powerful and formidable rivals. So even when he gets hit by a formidable attack from someone like Luffy moving into a second gear and they're exchanging before the time skip, or he gets hit by a formidable attack by someone like Trafalgar Law where he might not have expected it, and he gets moderately injured and surprised by it, he's not angry, upset, annoyed, or in this mood like he just wants to exterminate them and just shut them down, and he can't tolerate being challenged or hit with a very powerful attack. On the other hand, you always see this smile on his face. This is something that's very interesting. Blackbeard likes to have opponents who can do damage to him and to injure him, that can injure him. His own expressions kind of betray this fact. And for me, this is something that I've found causes me to like him as a character. He comes off at times as very respectful, and especially, despite maybe a little moment in Dressrosa, he's generally quite respectful of Monkey D. Luffy. And now compare that to how many other adversaries did Monkey D. Luffy encounter in his journey, where they immediately looked down on him and judged him as a weakling, judged his crew, were just totally saw them as something way below themselves, not worthy of any kind of mutual laugh or anything like that. That did not happen with Blackbeard's exchanges so far. Now, some could say that, and some have said in various forums, that recent events with Blackbeard attacking the island of Boa Hancock could be interpreted as some kind of move of disrespecting Luffy, but I don't think that's actually valid because, again, the move was not even centered on these things. We don't really know if Blackbeard is aware of how much of a relationship these two have had, and again, that relationship is already far less than what many of the romantic shipper type fans would like it to be. In all reality, we don't see Blackbeard going to attack Boa Hancock as some means of provoking Luffy by attacking one of his allies or friends. We see him going to attack Boa Hancock because, again, she has a powerful devil fruit, and he's afraid that the Marines are going to get their hands on it to weaponize it against him and the other pirates. That is his strategy has in mind. So even though Blackbeard has done things that by some would be seen as a provocation and sort of, I hate to say, they'd say the middle finger to Monkey D. Luffy, it's not really that. Again, so Blackbeard's men in the cover story, Aokiji and Van Augur, capture Pudding. But Blackbeard, we have no evidence that he's cognizant of any relationship between Pudding and Sanji, a member of Monkey D. Luffy's crew. And I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I am in absolute total agreement that the recent events are a setup for a conflict between the Blackbeard pirates and the Straw Hat pirates, and perhaps some members of their lines. That is basically undebatable. Blackbeard has captured certain people, antagonized certain people that are close to Luffy. Whether his intent was this or that won't even matter to Luffy. This is stuff that will definitely give our main character a good motivation to enter into a conflict with Blackbeard, without a doubt. All these various dots can easily be connected. You have Kobe being captured, Marines that want to rescue Kobe are currently residing on an island which is nearby to the current location of the Straw Hats on Egghead. You have everything else Blackbeard's done. You have the close proximity of the various islands in this section of the New World and the nature of the log post. A conflict with Blackbeard at this point seems inevitable, and personally, in my opinion, which could be wrong and you're more than welcome to disagree with, it seems very, very likely that Luffy and Blackbeard's conflict will occur before a major conflict, or the next major conflict, with the Marines, the Admirals, the world government. Unless, now of course I'd welcome any surprises, and I don't really have a preference in this matter, but that would be to me what the setup seems to indicate. And it's very exciting. These are exciting times for One Piece, because for many people who, like myself, became, I don't know if fan is the right word, but became people who found a lot of enjoyment of having a villain like Blackbeard around, for whatever reasons that would be. This is something we look forward to. And of course, the other obvious detail to comment on Blackbeard while we're at it is that he's really, as a villain, a fun character. If you look at the chaos he brings into the One Piece world and how quickly he moves. So one moment he's attacking this island, the next moment he's doing this. He's captured Kobe. He's having a fight with Trafalgar Law. This is an extremely active pirate. This is not a pirate who's sitting around slowly amassing power like perhaps someone like Kaido or Big Mom. This is a man who's in his pirate prime, who's very, very mobile, and he's not only relying on movements of a bunch of people in an organization who function like chess pieces. He himself is happy to be, though he could occupy, let's use the chessboard analogy, he could occupy a position like king and sit in the back. He could occupy a position like queen, which is actually, queen is used as an offensive piece, so that might be more accurate, not in a disrespectful or gender sense here at all. He could be the king and just sit in the back and be the guy you try to protect from getting checkmate. Instead, he's either the queen or something like the bishop or rook. He's something that's constantly moving and attacking and involved in the conflicts himself directly. This is something that is exciting for a character. It's very fresh, and it stirs up the One Piece world very much. Actually, for another analogy for Blackbeard's role in the context of how he serves the manga and the anime itself, we can say, imagine that the world inhabited by the characters of One Piece is like this big pool of water, which ironically, story-wise, is not entirely inaccurate, but for purpose of our own picture, like a pool of water, and now that pool starts to stagnate. There's not enough movement and current in the water, so you get the buildup of all these bacteria in there. It starts to become swamp-like, and while there might be some things that can survive it, the general rule of thumb would be you'll probably die drinking this water. Now you can say Blackbeard, with all the chaos, excitement, and locomotion he brings into the heart of the series, he's like the stick that goes in, stirs the water, gets it moving so that it doesn't stagnate and become like that. He keeps the series in a very real way actually enjoyable and exciting for the viewers. He serves this well, and I don't think anyone contests in any of the forums I've looked at or looked through, some of the big ones for the One Piece world. Most are in agreement that Blackbeard himself in the series, he seems to be the most pirate-like of all the characters shown thus far, and that's why his portrayal is so fantastic. And to add to this too, something I really enjoy, it's not just the manga, the way they characterized him in the anime with the type of voice actor, the sort of speech format he uses, and the enthusiasm of his speech, the excitement and vigor he brings into it. It really livens up the situation a lot for you.
月光森やこの声は風紀を乱すなよこの海賊島のふざけるな姿を見せろここは海賊たちの楽園だ楽しくなきゃいけねえおめえらパーティーは好きかだったら俺の船に乗れ森やお前も好きだろパーティーが今朝の新聞を読んだか退屈しねえよなレベリー4日目にして革命軍の軍隊長どもが熊奪還のためついに聖地マリージョアで海軍大将緑牛と藤虎とぶつかったそうだ一方の部隊は怪物街道の住む和の国話題の麦わらはじめ血の気の多い若造どもが島に集いそれを追うのはイカれた四皇ビッグマムどうなると思うもう始まってんだよ王の座をかけた強者どもの潰し合いが
And this is where we again talk about that powerful charisma he has as a character. You end up finding that it's always enjoyable to have Blackbeard on screen in the anime, even though he might in the moment not even be doing anything in particular besides just talking. The way he talks is overall exciting and enjoyable. So getting into it with consideration to whether there be any other details or not, there is more that I would posit for the potential character development and history and background of Blackbeard. So if you were reading the textual notes I've been leaving in this video, you'll notice I commented earlier that based on some observations, so I say this not with 100% certainty, but seeing it as a possible implication, Blackbeard may suffer from some amount of relationship deprivation, and some of his emotional cues of his personal quirks may be hinting to that. And now, while maybe this is not the prime focus of most as far as Blackbeard's concerned, because he has so many other areas where he's spectacular, his powers, his abilities, his mind. For me, this is something that stands out and I like to emphasize. And we do have some possible hints to this. So, interestingly, Oda did produce pictures of childhood Blackbeard in the SBS and various other things. And now we have to take this with caution and not make ourselves too certain, because we don't have the full background and context of why Blackbeard looks the way he did in his childhood in that image, or rather Marshall D. Teach. But what we do know from what we see of the images of childhood Blackbeard, he does not look like he had a very good and well-loved, well-cared-for type of past. We are not certain because all we have is a picture, but it kind of really seems to implicate a possibility that he might have had an abandoned childhood, no father figure, no protector, no defender, not a lot of compassion in his life, where maybe the first thing that was going good for him was Whitebeard showing up. And it's just something that's very interesting and compelling, because if you look at the image, Blackbeard, childhood Marshall Teach, seems to suffer a mix of emotions there, quite a bit of sadness and sorrow, but also at the same time anger. The facial expression seems to implicate some kind of resentment, probably feeling abandoned or betrayed is what I would suspect. And if you consider that, and what I mentioned earlier of how Blackbeard interacts with the older characters differently than he does with his contemporaries, it kind of makes a certain amount of sense. Blackbeard feeling resentment towards people like possibly Whitebeard, Kaido, Big Mom, Sengoku, Garp, might have something to do the fact with, or the possible fact that maybe when he was young and vulnerable, at a time where in the best interest of his own personal and emotional development, he needed some kind of father figure, some kind of protector and defender to help guide him through this chaotic One Piece world. He didn't have that, or the people who could have been that for him or tried to be that for him failed him and let him down, and left him with resentment, so that we see when he's older Blackbeard, a lot of that traumatic memory is still imprinted in his heart. So when he's talking about these old legends, it's with a term of annoyance, as if they don't offer any beauty or anything noble. All they can do is just be in his way. This kind of thing, this kind of element of his character, this starts to make a certain amount of sense. So this is something I find very interesting. I always appreciated how in Japanese culture and manga and anime, they're very bold about going into things like deeper meanings, spiritual implications, and things of the human emotional system. They explore very openly.
That day, if our positions were switched, would our fates be different? Would I have your life and you mine?
And of course, I'm not saying they're perfect culture by any means. While they at times show forth in their manga and anime some principles that are very noble and exhilarating, I will be the first to admit, based on the things I've seen and studied, that obviously the Japanese culture itself has not always lived up to those things. Neither has even the creators of the manga and anime lived up to the kind of things they try to portray all the time. But in the very least, they demonstrate a very high awareness of these things and are not ashamed to express that. So since that's such a big part of that culture and such a big part of manga and anime, it seemed fitting to acknowledge that consideration for the character of Marshall D. Teach and Blackbeard in the One Piece manga and anime. So I think in terms of what I have to focus on for Blackbeard at the moment, that's it. I might make more videos later speculating into the nature of his powers and things like that, but with details like that, I'm not as concerned as I am with the story development and those kind of things I just mentioned. So that's it for today. And I do want to take this time to leave one last reminder that if you find this kind of content helpful, that you would consider subscribing. And if you have it in you to be generous, you could consider throwing a donation to my donation page. It helps a lot to encourage me to have this knowledge that I can sort of focus on producing content like this without worrying about my time investment, because after all, my channel is not monetized and I have no plans to do so even in the future. So that really is it. God bless you, have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Peace to you.